I started off in a J3 Cub with an 80 horse engine, and rapidly I moved up to a 450 Stearman, and that's what I flew for Wheelers during the years I worked for him, with a 450 Stearman combination. And that was up through, let's see, 55 up through 58. I, along with Frank Horn, who was also flying for Wheelers, we went into business together in Blakely, Georgia, and bought 2 Grumman Ag Cats that year, and started the 59 season in 59 with 2 Grumman Ag Cats. It's interesting to know we paid $15,000 a piece for those 2 Ag Cats. So I picked it up, flew straight to a road over in Shellman and started putting out dust with it. But what I didn't realize, and he didn't either, is that the early Ag Cats, this was serial number 50 Ag Cat, and it had such a narrow gate box, such a narrow opening, that it would just go across the field like it was putting out Morse code. So I came in after the first load, and Frank says, "Are you trying to send me a signal out there?" So we had problems with those initial airplanes until we put reliever plates in the hoppers so that the load wouldn't pack into that narrow opening. And so after that first year, then Frank was also an instructor at Fort Rucker, and he didn't really want to be part of the ownership, so I bought him out. And then I heard about these 240 tank engines that were being sold that were stronger than the 220 Continentals. So I put the 240 tank engines on both of those airplanes, and they both ended up throwing the prop shaft, breaking the prop shaft off. I mean, it was a disaster. So then we said, well, the 220 won't work, the 240 won't work, so I put 450s on the Ag Cats, and that's what we had. And I ended up with a 7 450 Ag Cats. After a few years, what I realized was there was no way to grow the business, because you would put a pilot in Arlington like Fred Ayres, went to work for me in Arlington, and he moved there, he's local, he lives there. And so then he says, "Fred, I'm gonna buy my own airplane." Boom. So went Arlington. Another person I put in Edison, Georgia, he did the same thing. And so it just was going that way. So after a few years, I decided that maybe there was no growth for me. And so I became, in 1964, I continued my ag operation in Boca Raton, Florida. In fact, we even worked in Nicaragua one year. But I also became a Call Air dealer. Call Air had this little odd-looking airplane prior to that I wasn't interested in. The hopper was the right seat, a crazy-looking little airplane. But then they came out with the Call Air A9, which basically was the same size as a Piper Pawnee. A little heavier, didn't quite have the performance. But then they added to it an A9B, which was a 290 horsepower, and it did have it. So I became a Call Air dealer. I believe it was 64 was the last year I had the operation in Georgia. I operated out of my home on selling airplanes, and also did the business that I could there in South Florida. All of my ads and trade planes started Call Ayres for Call Ayres. In 1965, Rockwell bought Stowe Aeronautical, and they continued to build those Thrush airplanes in Albany, Texas. They also bought Call Air the next year. So I automatically became a Rockwell dealer by virtue of my Call Air dealership. My confidants in Rockwell then told me that eventually they will move both of those airplanes, the Thrush from Albany, the call air from Afton, Wyoming, into a factory that's just been built in Albany, Georgia. I decided to shut down my ag spraying operation at the end of 1967. And in January of 1968, we moved to Albany. And very shortly thereafter, I bought Command Air Service, being a fixed base operation on the Albany airport. Very quickly became a dealer for the general aviation airplanes that Rockwell built here in Albany, single engine airplanes. And I became a dealer for the twin engine airplanes that Rockwell built in Oklahoma City. I'm guessing it's about early 1970s, 71 maybe, something like that. They did in fact move the Thrush business to Albany. They had already moved the call air. They moved it down here in the 60s. And so there we were with Command Air Service, a full-blown fixed base operation. We had a charter business, twin engine airplanes, hauling a lot of automotive parts to Detroit and all kinds of places, plus passengers. We had a flight school, 24/7 operation with fueling Eastern Airlines that came in, and we were dealers for the product lines in Albany and Oklahoma. The Thrush, I always knew was absolutely as good as it was going to get as far as an airplane, but having spent many years behind these 450 Pratt engines, I knew they were good, but I knew they were many years old. And so starting in the early 60s, I was watching Pratt Whitney from Boca Raton when they developed the PT6 engine. As a matter of fact, I tried to get Pratt Whitney to sell me a PT6 engine to put in my ag cat as early as 1963. They looked at me like I had two heads or something. But I always had this interest. So then when I was settled there in Albany, I was able to hire Paul Nichols, who was a very good engineer that had been in Lockheed for years, but he had come home to be in Albany and went to work for Rockwell. Paul wasn't happy with the product line that Rockwell had here in the general aviation business at all. And so he came to work for me in 73, I believe. And I told him then that I had started working at home on an idea of putting a PT6 and a Thrush, if I could ever get Pratt Whitney to agree. So he ran the Command Air Service FBO for me, and he says, whenever you're ready to get serious about engineering, I'm ready. So in 1973, I contacted Derek Emerson at Pratt Whitney, who was in charge of PT6 sales. I started talking to him about putting a PT6 in an ag airplane. He says they would never go for it. They have no interest in it. It's not a practical application for a turbine engine. So after Jimmy Carter was inaugurated, first thing he did was counsel the B-1 bomber. And that was the backbone of Rockwell's operation at that time. So they started divesting themselves of all kinds of businesses. And in that bunch was the plant here in Albany, which they offered to me. And I accepted, bought it, and closed the deal the day before Thanksgiving that same year, 1977. Federal Express wanted a fleet of as many as 250 Loadmasters for somewhere around $4 million plus a piece.
$1 billion.
A $1 billion project. Well, at the same time, because FedEx was such a strong launch customer, I had also sold several 200 million worth of these airplanes internationally in advance. I wanted to initially build a prototype airplane whether it was certifiable or not, and just have it for investors' purposes. FedEx said, no, we want this airplane, we need this airplane now. We want the first one that rolls off the assembly line to have the FedEx logo on it, to be a certifiable airplane, and go straight to Memphis and start hauling packages. So you need to get assistance. You can't do it all right here in Albany, Georgia. So I ended up contracting with Fairchild in San Antonio, which I thought was a very solid company, to do the detailed design of the fuselage. And they were supposed to have also done the computer-aided structural testing as they went. We were paying them $300,000 a month for the work they were doing. We weren't tracking them close enough. We should have. They assured us that all the finite element computer work was being done in Germany. It wasn't. They would send the details down, and we built the first fuselage from that design, sent it out to San Antonio to be tested, and it failed. That was in middle of September 2000. So that in itself it could have been fixed. But what I didn't realize was that it was a perfect storm that had been forming, and it was now on us. Several things were going on in the perfect storm. LH Tech engine was the engine of choice for FedEx for this airplane. LH Tech was an engine being built by Rolls-Royce and Honeywell. It was scheduled to be the Comanche helicopter engine, and the Comanche helicopter was going to take over all of the helicopter requirements for the Army forever. So it was a giant program up until about 2000, and then it got very questionable whether they would ever build the Comanche helicopter, much less ever sell an engine to the military. Meanwhile, what I didn't know at San Antonio was that Fairchild was broke. We were sending them $300,000 a month, which they desperately needed just to keep the doors open. I didn't know that. And they ended up declaring bankruptcy and then having to admit in a lawsuit that they never did the finite element testing that would have prevented the structural failure of the fuselage. And with that, investors are running for cover. GATX, that was the big financier company that was going to provide all the financing needed in addition to what FedEx was paying as progress payments. Suddenly they got queasy about everything and couldn't provide more financing. FedEx backed off of providing more financing because they said there's no progress, so there's no progress payment. And so everything just in this perfect storm finally rolled up by, we had declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy in November of 2000, operated through with debtor in possession financing until August 2001. It wasn't getting any better in any respect, and we finally had to shut it down. By the end of 2000, unless we had received the progress payments from FedEx that we felt were in arrears, there was no way to continue. Now, none of this had anything to do with the Thrush program. The Thrush program was fine, but it couldn't carry the weight of a project that was going to ultimately need $70 million in advance financing to ever get the first one rolling off the line, you see. Ayres Corporation is still existing, but has no business to speak of at all. And I still have my insurance agency that I've had since 1969, aviation insurance agency. I still sell some used airplanes internationally. I worked for Thrush Aircraft for 4 years handling their international sales after they took over.
Well, Fred, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you allowing us to take this video of you today.
Well, I'm glad to do it.
It's a moment in history for the industry, and I think it's a good thing that we've been able to capture.
All righty, thank you.